Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm super excited to be here with you today for our webinar, the new online dispensary application process. So we have three main goals tonight in this presentation. First, we're going to teach you how to organize documents to succeed throughout this application process. Second, we're going to summarize some of the key application rules, hopefully to help you not get tripped up by them throughout the application cycle. And then third, we are going to explain how to prepare for the document proof process so that you can put your best foot forward. So many of you know us, but to those of you who are new to us, I am S.L. Owens. I'm the Chief Cannabis Officer and Legal Educator over here at CannaTrep, which is a law and business clinic that focuses on serving social equity applicants in the state of Illinois. I'm here with my teammate, the rock star Tricia Teague, who is the CEO of this company over here, as well as the business consultant trainer and program director for the program. And so we are always excited to connect with you all and to connect with each other because we just love working together. Our partnership is funded through the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, the IDCEO. The views expressed in the presentation tonight do not represent the state of Illinois or the IDCEO. Additionally, we are not a law firm. We are an educational services company. So please do not use the information here tonight as legal advice. Instead, use it as educational content. If you want legal advice, please consult an attorney. Additionally, cannabis law, which we'll discuss tonight, rapidly changes due to litigation, legislation, regulation, and therefore things happen, things change. There are things that have changed in this application process, which I'll get to, that have changed from Monday when the application opened till Tuesday on the second day of the application. And so the information presented tonight is current as of February 1st. So just keep that in mind as you're referencing this presentation, because we are recording it for you to be able to continue to reference, but keep that in mind as you're referencing the information that we provide tonight, because you may need to also continue to keep yourself updated on changes that happen throughout the process. And we at CannaTrep do send out community education emails to provide you with updates on things that change as they change, like we sent out an update on a change this week, which I'll get to. So our agenda tonight, we're going to start with how to organize documents like a great lawyer. I used to say like a lawyer, but now I say like a great lawyer, because not all lawyers are the same, just like any other professional. And I want to show you guys how to do this thing here like an excellent attorney would do. Then I'll move on to summarizing some of the top application rules for you to analyze. And then we'll take a brief break and take a short survey. Hopefully you will all participate in that survey so that we can continue to offer these programs that we offer, as well as continue to improve them and address any of your needs on an ongoing basis. Then third, we will conclude with preparing for the document proof process in the application cycle that's going on with IDFPR right now. The format tonight, we will accept questions through the Q&A box throughout the webinar. So please, if you already have questions, throw them in the Q&A box and tee them up for us, because I'm happy to answer those questions as we move along. We will only be addressing on-topic questions related to tonight's webinar, and that is the new online dispensary application process. We aren't going to address any of the off-topic questions, and we encourage you, should you have questions that are not related to tonight's webinar, to go to our website, www.cannatrep.com, and submit those questions to our brief advising program, where we'll answer them, do some research, and help you get to an answer. But tonight, we're going to stay focused on the new online dispensary application process, because it's a lot of information to cover, and we want to make sure that you all are prepared and equipped with the tools that you need to compete. So the first thing I'm going to make sure everyone sees before I get started is that in the chat box, we dropped a link to a document in our public Dropbox called a document table. Please pull that document up when you get a chance, because it'll be a helpful tool for you to have in the application process. And it'll also be a helpful tool for you to have during tonight's presentation. So go ahead and pull that up. And if you're having issues, please put that in the chat. Like if you're having a trouble pulling up the document, but you shouldn't, because we dropped the link and hopefully everything is working smoothly for you. All right, so how to organize documents like a great lawyer for this application process. So the first thing you need to do is find the credible information. There are so many sources of information in the cannabis industry, but the absolute best and sole source for information that you need to have is on IDFPR's website. I want you guys to make sure that you are on IDFPR's website, because there is a spoof site that sometimes appears that is not IDFPR's website. And so one way for you to know that you are at the right site is if you look at this URL up here and it has the .gov at the end, the spoof site and potentially fraudulent site has a .com at the end. So I just want to put that out there, that the first thing you want to do is always make sure you're on the proper government agency website and not on some scammer's website, all right? So this is where all of the information you need for the application process is. It's under the Adult Use Cannabis Program section of IDFPR's website, and you'll see information for social equity criteria lottery and a whole bunch of application information and previous announcements. Now, for those of you who registered early enough to see in the workshop description where I say, hey, I'm giving you some homework, look at this website, and I gave you a link. I'm sure if you looked at it, you're like, whoa, this is a lot of information. And it is, this is a ton of information. And so in order to help you all organize yourselves like a great lawyer, I am going to help you out with a tool that we use in the legal industry called a document table. Sometimes we also call it a table of documents. But essentially what it is a helpful tool that you can use to help you navigate when you're dealing with a complex legal process. And so this way you have everything listed out and organized and broken up into categories that describes the documents so that you can keep up with the information that you're receiving, because information is constantly coming in. And as you can see on the website right now, there's a ton of information out there. All right, so I want you all to use this document table, but understand that you need to keep up with any updates that happen, because a new document was posted on there just as recent as Tuesday related to this process, which I'll get to. And I would say if you have questions about particular documents on that table, when you put them in the Q&A, if you can reference the document number, that will help me navigate and get to your questions in an orderly fashion. So the first set of documents on this table, which are all documents that I pulled from IDFPR's website, the only document that is on there that I pulled from another section of their site, not that section on the application, is the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. And that is the chief legislation that governs the cannabis industry in Illinois, which I want to make sure that you guys know you need to have that in your back pocket to participate in this industry. And so documents number 1 through 5, if we just kind of quickly take a walk through them, and again, I use this too, I have the document table in front of me. These are the documents that all have to do with the application process. So these documents describe how the application process is going to go and include the mock application. So the first one is the steps for social equity criteria lottery. That document is a visual map that tells you all of the processes that are going to happen from A to Z. So that's a great document to start with, just to be able to digest how this process is going to work. The next document on there is the apply for the social equity criteria lottery. That is a link to the application, the online portal. Then there's a mock application. I strongly recommend that you spend some time looking at that mock application. One of the things that you'll notice on the mock application is there are legal citations under some of the sections that tell you where the laws and rules are for that part of the application. And I recommend that whenever you see one of those legal citations, that you go ahead and pull that rule or law up, which I also link on this table for you, and I'll tell you where in a second. Then you have the license distribution by BLS region. That is a map of all of the BLS regions and how many licenses are up for grabs in the lottery for each one of those regions to help you make a decision about where you're going to be applying. And then there's the announcement that just came out Tuesday. The application portal went live Monday, but by Tuesday, there was a repair issue that had the portal closed down. And so that is an update from IDFPR explaining that the application portal is now currently closed, and that there was an error where there was the wrong application uploaded to the site, and they had to close it to repair it, and they're going to announce when it's open back up. Please read this announcement for sure if you've already submitted an application, because it says in the announcement that you have to resubmit your application and that you do not have to pay another application fee. So please take a look at that, particularly if you have already submitted an application. So that's the first group of documents. So those are the documents you need for the application process. The next set of documents on this table are proving your social equity status. And that is the social equity criteria guide. That guide describes the criteria A and criteria B that must be fulfilled for you to be eligible for this lottery. All right. Please read that document. I really recommend that you read it. In it will explain things like how you get to your 51% to be eligible, which I'll get into that rule a little later. But I want you to have the source materials on hand so that you can take a look at it for yourself to make sure that you're assembling a team that meets these legal requirements. Then there's an interactive map called the Social Equity Criteria A interactive map, because if you read the criteria under A, pretty much all of those factors are related to where you live and how long you've lived there. And so this map that they built is to help you put your address in, or as many addresses as you have to fulfill that requirement, to see if it qualifies for this to meet the obligations of this criteria. Now, please note, if you look at the disclaimer on that link of that interactive map, it says this is not legal advice. So keep that in mind in terms of definitely double check and triple check even outside of that map, just to make sure that the information that you're putting in your application is correct. Because we know mistakes happen. We saw a mistake already, an error already this week with the portal being closed down for repair. Then there's the social equity criteria acceptable document guide. That's the document guide that you will use as your main guide to putting together your proof documents. And by proof, I mean proof of your social equity status. That's what that document does. So it tells you which documents you need in order to fulfill that obligation for criteria A, and which documents you need to fulfill the criteria B. All right. And then the next section on this table is the final laws and rules, and that's document 9 and 10. So we have the final rules for the 55 conditional licenses. Shout out to anybody that was at our webinar last week on legislative advocacy. If you missed that webinar, please go back and watch the recording. It'll be uploaded to our website in the next few days, maybe by early next week. All right, because in that webinar, we talk about how cannabis law is structured with chief legislation that comes out of the legislature. So that's the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. That's the CRTA, right? And then there's the agency rules that are made, right? And that's the rules that are made by IDFPR, for example, for this application process. One of the mistakes that people made in the last application rounds is they were only looking to the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, and they were missing the accompanying rules that go with it from IDFPR. So I made sure that I linked both of these on here for this table so that you all have both sets of guidelines so that you can participate in this process well equipped. Now, the next things in here, these next two sections, these are just background, this is background information, all right? But it's helpful to understand the background information just so you can kind of see how we got to here if you have not been following along with the legislative process or you haven't been following along with the rulemaking process, okay? These draft rules and rulemaking process documents, these are not the rules right now that govern this process. These are prior drafts of the rules and they're different. They're uploaded on their site, and that's why I wanted to make sure that I explain to you in this chart, in this table, these are not the rules that you want to use to understand the current and final law. All right, you want to use these final laws and rules, not draft. All right, so I just want to make sure that some of you don't get confused on their website and mess around and click on the wrong set of rules, and you'll be looking at the draft rules. And the reason why this matters is because the definition for social equity applicant has changed numerous times throughout the rulemaking process. So the final draft of what they mean by social equity applicant in this application round is different than even draft 1 and draft 2 of the proposed rules when they were first starting and going through this rulemaking process, all right? And so you have the proposed rules that they initially put out, right? Then you have the second notice that they put out, which is another draft of proposed rules. Then you have the first notice and the final adoption document saying, okay, this is what we did throughout the rulemaking process from beginning to end. All right, so this is on their website, but this is not what you all need to know in terms of understanding what the current rule is. For those, you need to look at the final rules in law, okay? And then there was an extension during the rulemaking process, and that's what this document is, where the JCAR, which is the state agency that regulates agencies who make rules, they had to have an extension process for IDFPR. I'm gonna take a little stop here, Tricia, so that I can see whether any of these questions are related to what we've done so far, or whether I'm going to get to them later. So let's take a little.
Yeah, a lot of questions came in before you started.
Okay.
So I think you can take a look at them, but I think some of them are things that you're going to address shortly. So I'm leaving them.
Yeah.
So there was one question that I did answer, and because I typed the answer, it went ahead and sent, but I just want to address that. So going to CannaTrep.com, you're only going to go there to send us a brief advising if you have a question that is not related to the new dispensary application. The document table is not on the website yet. So we have put the link in the chat. So everyone should be able to pull up that document directly. You can download it so that you can have it for yourself, to be able to use it as a checklist. But I just want to make sure that everyone is clear on where to find what.
Okay. Cool. We want to make sure people have that tool because, as you can see, Tricia, you know, there's a lot. You know, you see there, you monitor the website, so you see there's constant updates and alerts coming out. And I want to make sure, for example, in particular, that people aren't using the draft rules by mistake because they're under that tab. And if you're not familiar with the rulemaking process, then you can get tripped up there. Okay.
And I just want to also point out, like you said, for those who haven't actually downloaded the document yet and haven't actually got a chance to interact with it, that document has links out to all of the other things. So you really want to download it and save a copy so you keep clicking on those links.
And let me pull it up. Let me pull it up though for them. Give me a second. Just
Okay.
so for those who are still still clicking the link so that they can see what I'm talking about. So give me 1 second to do a new share. Because this document, I definitely want to make sure everybody is familiar with how to use it. Okay. We have made this document available on Dropbox through a public link that Tricia placed in the chat box, okay? And on it, what I've done here is create what is called a document table, where I've taken all of this just flurry of information that is on IDFPR's website. And I have organized it for us all in a way to make it accessible to you if you are not a lawyer. In a way that an excellent lawyer would do if they were working this case for a client. A client came to me and said, help me with this process. Big SL. Help me out. I would say, okay, client. And the first thing I would do is find credible information, as I mentioned, as the first step, and make sure that I'm not on a spoof website, which they do exist, and they particularly pop up during times like this, you guys. You filling out wrong applications and taking your money. And I don't want to see that happen to any of you. So make sure you are at IDFPR's website, okay? So now I've gone to IDFPR's website and I have organized these documents into buckets. Buckets that should make more sense to you than just constantly throughout the process, clicking on their website and trying to open up all these browsers and digest this complex information. So instead, I've simplified it for us all, as I would do for a client. And I've put one bucket being, these are really the documents that are related to what I'm calling the application process. That is documents number 1 through 5. You all can use this as a checklist. Please use this as a checklist as Tricia is suggesting. Print it off and go to IDFPR website and double check my work, okay? And go on there and see if you can find document number 1. Find it, check it off, make sure the link is working, okay? Do it for every one of these documents so that you can understand the information related to this process, because as you can see, I have 17 documents and counting, and I just added one because there was already a repair issue. So they added a document to tell us all the portal is closed, we're repairing it. And then they're gonna add another document that'll be an 18th document, right? And as they add documents, I will agree to this for y'all on air because y'all know, if y'all know me and Tricia, you know we are passionate about helping our social equity applicants. What I will do is when IDFPR makes a change and uploads more documents, I will update this and we will send out a notice so that you all can stay organized throughout the process. That sound like a plan, Tricia?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what we'll do. This is the information as of February 1st. The next thing I expect them to do is put up another announcement saying the portal is back open. And I will update that, put this in here, put the link to it so that you all can stay organized, all right? So make sure you have access to this. And the questions that are coming in about social equity status, we're gonna go through that together in this presentation, so we don't have to dig into that quite yet. All right. Here we go. Is my slide back up?
Yes.
All right. And then this last set of documents are just other announcements they've made throughout this process. Announcements that, hey, we're going to do a new dispensary application. Hey, we're going to make it online. Hey, we're going to make it simplified so it's more accessible. Hey, we're going to make it cheaper. It's not going to be thousands of dollars. It's going to be $250. Those types of things. All right. The other thing that we've already kind of touched on some, but I want to touch on it some more because this is already coming up and we are on day 1, 2, 3, 4 of the application window. Please avoid the frauds and the scams. All right. What do some of those look like? Pay to play arrangements. Okay. So some examples are, if someone is telling you to, that they're going to pay you some money for your social equity status, I'm not saying that that is absolutely a fraud. I'm saying that it could possibly be one. So you want to make sure that you know what's going on. Because we're already seeing, for example, we're seeing some postings on like Craigslist and other e-commerce sites where people are claiming they're going to pay people thousands of dollars to join application teams, to do things like that. And all I'm saying is watch your back. Make sure these aren't frauds. Make sure these aren't scams. Make sure these aren't people who are never going to pay you and mess up your opportunity to apply for yourself. Make sure these aren't people who are never going to submit that application and just pretending to keep you out of the lottery. Unfortunately, I have to be this dark about it as a lawyer who's been in this game for a while. It is bad out here with the frauds and the scams, period, in Illinois, and definitely in the cannabis industry, okay? So be alert, be alert. Deceitful experts. Unfortunately, there are folks that will pretend like they are a lawyer, for example, and they're not a lawyer. Okay, watch out for people who claim that they are consultants, but they never did work in this industry before. Check their credentials. Some ways you can check people's credentials and business bona fides is right online at the Illinois Secretary of State. Ask them their company name, see if they're registered, see who the managers and owners are. All right. If they claim that they are an attorney, go to the ARDC website. All you have to do is go ARDC Illinois on Google, attorney lookup. And you can look up anybody who's attorney. You go in there right now, you put in S.L. Owens. I will pop up. It'll tell you that I am in good standing. And it will tell you our disciplinary history as well. Okay, please do not get scammed out of your money and your opportunity. Watch out for untrustworthy affiliates. All right, what I mean by that is things we see are people who claim to be affiliated with the process or affiliated with the state. So for example, over here at CannaTrep, we are a partner to the state at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. That is real, that is not fraudulent. You can look that up in public records. We are a partner in this game. So just make sure that people who are telling you, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, just double check now. All right, because I don't want you guys emailing us saying, oh, they told me this because now you know I told you. Scheming websites. Watch out for the www.idfpr.com scam. You need www.idfpr.gov. Okay. Tricia, I'm going to do another sweep to make sure that it's not stuff related to the things I covered, because so far it looks like all of this stuff is questions about rules, which is the next section. And so I'd rather cover rule stuff during the rules section that we're getting to next.
Yes, and I just want to address the one question in here about access to the document. Please go in the chat, and the link is in the chat directly.
Okay. Okay. So, top application rules that you should analyze. Important note, this section will summarize only some of the rules. You should review all of the rules, okay? Because I could be here, we could be here a long time going through every single rule and law in the Illinois cannabis industry. I am focused on some of the top rules that I think could trip people up, okay? But please go and review all of the rules, at least the application rules, right? And those rules for this, if you go to the document table, document number 9, click that link. Those are all of the application rules from IDFPR, okay? But if you were at legislative advocacy webinar last week, you know that rules do not exist in a vacuum. They exist at least as a pair. And the paired rule here is the IDFPR application rules for this social equity criteria lottery that should be paired with the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. So an example would be, if you're looking at this application and you see something, and you'll see this if you look at the mock application, it says something about principal officer, which I'll discuss too. That's a legal term, okay? You go to, you like, whoa, principal officer. Now they have a citation, I believe, on there. But if they didn't have a citation where you would go to find out like that what does principal officer mean? It seems important. You would start with document 9 and you would look for the definition of principal officer. Matter of fact, you know what? We got time. Tricia, I'm about to pull this up as an example for them because I just want to make sure I know how hard this can be, you know, when you're not a lawyer. So I want to just go ahead and pull it up for them.
Okay.
So just give me a second to show them what I mean. Look, using the document table for myself. So give me a second here. And let me pull up the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. I'm doing this because the last time a lot of folks really missed this part of understanding the cannabis laws. Okay. So let me pull it up here. You see my web browser?
Yes.
Sweet. All right, so if you're looking at the application and it's talking to you about all these rules for principal officers, and you're trying to figure out what is that, I need to understand more about principal officer. The first place you go is document 9. Those are the rules. And you see in the document description for number 9, the applicable and final rules for the newest online application process. You will pull up this rule. And the first place I go for a term that I think is a term of art is the definition section right here. And I would just go through here because it's not that long and it's in alphabetical order. I just scroll on down, see, principal officer. Here's the definition right here. Now you would notice that it says section 110 of the act. The act they mean here is the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. So if I want to make sure that this is the same and that there's not more for me to know, that's when I'm going to pull up the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. And I'm also going to go to the definition section. And I'm also going to go and look at the definition of principal officer again. And this is how you organize like an attorney, making sure you understand the full scope here. LMNO, look at me. What's my alphabet? And you try to find principal officer. This is how all regulatory law works. The energy sector, the franchise industry, any regulated industries work like this. And this is why I want you guys to go back and look at that legislative advocacy webinar, because we talk about how this stuff works. You always have the laws made by the legislator. Here, that's the CRTA, the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, that's document 10. And in the legislation, the legislator empowers the agency to do things. And in this case, that's the IDFPR to handle applications for dispensaries. And then the IDFPR creates rules, also called administrative law. That's what these are. This is important stuff for you guys to know, especially if you are doing this pro se without counsel. Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I covered that, Tricia, you know, because I like to show examples because I'm a visual learner myself. So I'm like, let me just show you versus just keep saying it. All right. So let's get back to the thing. Okay. So when I say review all the rules, what I mean is at minimum review all the rules under number 9. Number 9 on this. Read it. Okay. Why did I pick the rules that I'm covering tonight? All right, so the rules I picked tonight, they have to do with how you assemble your application team and your applicant entity. So by application team, that is all of the people that you are going to form your team to apply for this license. Applicant entity is if you guys decide to create a company together, that is the legal company that you're going to use to apply, okay? Now, just to be clear about the difference between the application team and the applicant entity is your application team could be made up of, for example, a bunch of people with their own LLCs. I'm just using that as one example. So let's say Tricia and I decided to form an application team because we just love working together. And I'm on the team, she's on the team. She and I could decide to form that team in a way that says, well, I have a company called S.L. Company LLC. And she has a company called Tricia Company, LLC. And we could decide to have both of those companies come together to own another entity that we call Tricia and S.L Company, LLC. And we can make that our applicant entity. Okay. The other thing we could do is we could say, well, we want to be teammates together, and we're just going to go straight for, I'm not going to create my own individual company, and you create your own individual company. Instead, we're just going to start off with Tricia and S.L LLC and make ourselves both owners in our individual capacities of that LLC, as opposed to making our individual companies the owners of that LLC. So while they did make this application process more streamlined, where I see people potentially getting tripped up in this application is around issues related to business formation. And I particularly see people getting tripped up when it relates to the rules in these three categories of legal documents. Business formation documents. Those are the documents that you use to form companies and partnerships and nonprofits and for-profits and associations. Ownership and partnership documents. Those are the documents that describe who owns what, who manages what, how you're going to run the company together, what the company is for, how you're going to exit the company, get in the company, what do you have to buy in to be in the company, capital, all of those different things. And what I'm calling accountability documents. And those will be documents that get into things like what you're telling me as my prospective business partner and new business partner is true. So when you tell me that you meet the definition of criteria A, you're telling me the truth. So let's start with one of the rules. One application. You can only submit one application per principal officer. Your team can only submit one application, period, to one BLS region. We talked about this just now. Principal officer is a legal term. Read it to make sure you understand. I'm not going to just, read this to you all because the link is there for you to be able to read it. So I don't want to, waste our time with that because I want to make sure I get to questions. But I just want to point out this rule. This is important to how you form companies together and how you decide to manage them and who has control and ownership so that you can prove your social equity status. The resignation rule. This is a really important one to understand. A principal officer may resign under the rules. There's a rule saying that they can resign in order to make a submitted application eligible. So let's say during the process, IDFPR contacts you with a deficiency notice saying, hey, you all are not eligible. You're not getting to that 51% based on the documents that you submitted to us. One of you, a principal officer that's making you ineligible, if you determine that, they can resign to make your application eligible. But here's why this is important in terms of corporate law, all right? In terms of getting yourself educated, right? What do you have in place document-wise with your partners for them to resign? What if they say, I'm not resigning? So you want to make sure that whatever documents you have in place with your teammates, that you all may consider being in agreement that if you are deemed to not actually meet that social equity criteria, you have to resign legally. Because what if they say no, nope, I'm not resigning. All right, so that's why I want you to understand these particular rules, because they matter in terms of like, just because the law in Illinois is saying a principal officer may resign, that may not be, you may not be empowered to do that under your operating agreement. For example, if you form an LLC with your teammates, you may not be empowered to do that under your under your bylaws, if you form a corporate entity, under your partnership agreement. So you want to make sure that any agreements that you guys are coming up with each other are aligned with things you need under these application laws and rules. Next, there is a no replacement rule. A principal officer cannot be replaced to make a submitted application eligible. A principal officer can only be replaced in the event of death if needed to make a submitted application eligible. So I'm going to walk you guys through this a little bit more. A principal officer can resign to make you eligible, to make your team eligible. So if on their resignation, you become eligible, good, great. But if they resign and you're still not eligible, you don't get to replace them to make yourself eligible. The only way you can replace a principal officer is if they die, and them dying makes you ineligible. If they, this is morbid, I know. So trigger warning, I probably should have gave, because this is pretty morbid. So what I'm saying here is, if your principal officer dies in this process and them dying makes you ineligible, you can replace them to become eligible again. If your principal officer dies in this process and your team is still eligible, even in the event, even in context of their death, you cannot replace them even though they die. Okay. So you want to make sure that your teammates are eligible before you agree to be in a team with them. You want to make sure that they can meet this 51% rule. 51% or more owned or controlled by the eligible individuals meeting criteria A and criteria B. This does not mean multiple individuals must meet identical criteria, but that each individual must meet at least one criteria from A and one criteria for B. So let's go back to the Tricia and S.L. company. If Tricia and I decided to form an application team together, I would need to be eligible under A and B. And if I was eligible under A and B, right, I would need to own 51% of the company if Tricia was not eligible under A and B. Let's say I was the eligible one. So that means I need to own and control 51% of the company. Own or control 51% of the company. And Tricia could get 49% because she does not meet A and B. Let's say both me and Tricia meet A and B. Then we got some room to play with it, because 100% of the company, no matter what the split is, meets A and B. All right. The honesty rule. All answers and supporting documents must be true. If any application information or supporting documents are deemed not true, the individuals and entity or entities associated with the application will be disqualified. All right, so those are all of the rules. And Tricia, now let's start getting to these questions that's related to the rules. And what I'm going to do is, I'm probably going to be pulling up rules and showing people how to find their answers. Okay. You know, because I'm not always around. That's why we do this. Mm-hmm. So that I can show people how to do this for themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the first question is from Jim Cobb, and it says, does being a victim of gun violence qualify as part of the social equity or having a parent that was addicted to drugs?
All right, so where, Jim Cobb, thank you for your question. Where you would find this answer, you could either find it in the rules under document 9, and I'm gonna pull that up. I'm gonna help you find it, don't worry, but I wanna first start showing you guys how to do it because I want you to know how to do this throughout the process. So you could find it.
Are you gonna share your screen?
Am I sharing it now?
Now
okay.
You are.
So I'm so glad that this is not a long rule book. So I am just looking for conditional license lottery. Mind you guys, I've been in here a lot, so I kind of know how to, you know, buzz around here really quickly. So just give me a second. And this is what I'm showing you in real time what I would be doing to answer this question. I'd be going to the rules to find out what the rules are. I think here is where it's gonna be. Yes, all right. So I went around the rules because what I'm looking for is criteria A and criteria B. And you asked about gun violence. So what I would do is I would control gun to see if I find anything. My control thing doesn't work sometimes. Let me try to see when I'm on, hold on. Let me make sure that I know it's in here because it's B. Firearm. So did you guys see that? It's not under gun violence. They're calling it. So you need to look at the criteria, Jim, right? You need to look at criteria A and criteria B. So A is here. And I was telling you guys that A has to do a lot with where you live. And B has to do a lot with being an impacted person through the justice system and through gun violence. And right here, you see firearm injury, an individual who has been a victim of a firearm injury. Okay? And it says, so let's start with your first question, which is, does being victim of gun violence qualify? So firearm injury, evidence by either a police report or medical record. So this is where they're telling you what you would need to show as proof. And then it says, as those terms are defined in this part. So I would go look to see if they have a definition of firearm under definitions, just to make sure I'm touching my bases here. Firearm injury. Firearm injury means a gunshot wound or penetrating injury from a weapon that uses a powder charge to fire a projectile. Weapons that use a power charge include handguns, rifle, and shotguns. Injuries from air and gas-powered guns, BB guns, and pellet guns are not considered firearm injuries, as these types of guns do not use a powder charge to fire projectiles. So to answer your question, your first one, yes, so long as it is a gunshot wound from a weapon that uses a powder charge to fire a projectile, like a handgun, rifle, or shotgun. That's your first question. Your second question is, or having a parent that was addicted to drugs. So once again, I'm still in the rules, and I will be going back. Criteria A. Now, this is where you will look to see if they have made that part of it. Let me look at your question. A parent that was addicted to drugs. I would, like I did last time, try to see if I see anything about These questions you're asking me, I happen to know, but I'm still gonna walk through so that I can show you how I would do it. Okay, drug, parents. All right, so that kind of lets me know, probably not if I can't find the term. Then I would just scroll down and look at criteria A. This has to do with where someone lived, where someone lived, where someone lived, whether they received any of these benefits, where they lived, whether they've been arrested or adjudicated for any offenses for cannabis, family members adjudicated for these cannabis offenses, and gun violence here. So Jim, what I don't see is addicted to drugs, but what I do see here is if you think of some of the things that happen with those of us, including myself, who have grown up in impacted areas and have had a parent addicted to drugs in a neighborhood impacted by the war on drugs, there are other things that happen in those families that could qualify. So Jim, if I were you, I would look under here to see if there's something else under here that qualifies because a parent was addicted to drugs. So for example, if being addicted to drugs made them qualify, for example, for receiving Medicaid, SSI, disability, or subsidized housing because they were living in poverty. If they had any of these other poverty indicators where they lived in the last 5 to 10 years. So I will look for some of the things that happen to families as a result of drug addiction in the family, in a neighborhood impacted by the war on drugs, and see if it fits any of these. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions, Jim. Okay, Tricia, I'm done with that one.
Okay, the next question does not have a name. Can I enter the lottery through the social equity program as an individual without having a company set up?
Okay. Oh, on my end, I see a name, Alexander Brown.
I don't know what happened on my.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Let's look at the mock application. Where would I go? Mock application, that's number 2, document number 2. So Tricia, I'm just gonna pull that up because I just do like to do this to show people. So I would go to the mock application. I'm sorry, that's document number 3. Apologies, number 3. So that I can see what it says. And then let me go to my new screen share. Oh, is it on the mock application?
I'm not seeing anything.
No? Okay. New share. How about now, sister?
Yes.
Okay, so this represents a mock-up. Okay, so right here, there's a bunch of things that they ask on the application. And one of the things that they don't ask, let me just scroll through here to double check this, is I don't believe that you have to have an entity name because they don't require any entity types. Proposed entity name. And this came up throughout the process about whether people should have this organized already, and the answer is no. If you do have a proposed entity name, you can put it here, but if you don't have one, that's okay. But what I will tell you is this, you may want to be careful if you're going to be in business with partners, not having any business formation or ownership agreements. All right, so I would start here, looking at the application just out of curiosity. And then the other place I would go, as I think you guys know by now, is the rules. And this is where it tells you a completed application shall include the non-refundable fee at minimum the following information. The applicant's proposed entity name. So just because you haven't formed the company, doesn't look like that's a prohibition. They just want to know the name of the proposed company you want to form. The name of the person filling out the application, the BLS region in which the applicant is applying, the name, social security number, or individual taxpayer identification number, home address, birthday, phone number, email addresses for all proposed principal officers of the proposed entity. That's the company in your case that you're saying you want to form if you don't have it formed yet. The identification of and contact information, including phone numbers, email addresses for primary and alternate contact of the proposed entity, at least one of whom must also be a principal officer. An acknowledgement that if awarded an opportunity for a license, the business entity is 51% or more owned or controlled by one or more individuals who each meet the combination of at least one, this is an error, of the criteria under subsection E6A, criteria A, and one of the criteria under subsection E6B, criteria B. Nowhere in here does it say the entity has to be formed in this rule. So to answer your question, no, you don't have to have it. You can. Can I enter the lottery through a social equity program as an individual without having a company set up? Yes. Nothing in the rules is prohibiting that. Okay, I'm ready for the next one, Queen.
When submitting criteria A and criteria B for the social equity application, is there a form or letter that we should be including when submitting our information? And this is from
I'm sorry, say that again, sister.
I said, and this was from Melina, because I didn't say her name.
Thank you, Melina, for your question. Great question. Where I would start with this is again on the mock application, which is number 3. Is my mock application showing yet, Tricia?
Yes.
Okay. This mock application, I've looked at it a ton of times, none of it on here, and Melina, you go read this too, that says that you have to attach anything. I don't see anything about attachments here. So I'm just control, attach, doesn't even show up, okay? But what does show up on here is an acknowledgement that the criteria A is gonna be met and the criteria B is gonna be met for that 51% rule. So at this point in the process, they're just asking you to acknowledge that you meet the criteria. They're not asking you for documents. If you want to know when they're going to ask you for more information beyond the application, you should go to document number 1 on the document table. Document number 1 is a visual infographic for the application process. So let's pull that up together. Steps for social equity criteria lottery. Are my steps showing, Tricia?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So you want to know when you got to show proof of your social equity status. If you read this document under number 6, it says you have to show it after they post eligible lottery participants. Number 3, number 4, not till 6. So first you submit your application and you just say you think you're eligible. Then under number 3, they're gonna post a list of the applicants who they think are eligible for a lottery. Then they're gonna have a 5-day window under step 4 for people to say, wait a minute, I submitted an application. Why isn't my team on that list? Maybe there was some kind of glitch and you missed my application. So make sure you're watching out for this. because you're only gonna get 5 days to contest the list. Then they're gonna have the law. And they're gonna pull 55 people to win, called top participants. That's a legal term that you can find defined. And then once your name is pulled, if you are one of the lucky ticket holders, that's when you have 45 days to prove your social equity status. So this is very different than the last time where you had to submit all of these documents on the front end when you submitted your application. This time, the only people who have to send in prove up documents are the people who actually win the lottery. Great question, Melina. Thank you. Let me know if you need a follow-up, and you can put it in to the chat. I'm sorry, the Q&A. Put it in the Q&A. Put it in the Q&A, y'all.
The next question is, can we apply in multiple regions or multiple times?
I believe that my presentation covered that, which was no, one application. But let's go to the rules, so you can see where they put that at in here. Just give me a second. Let's look for, oh wait, I don't think I have my screen sharing. Hold on. So I want you guys to be able to, oh, I do?
Where you are on the rules.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay. So this is where I would go to find out if there's a rule about this to make sure. So I believe that the answer, I know for sure off the top of my head, the answer, because this is a two-part question. One part is, can you apply to multiple regions? The other is, can you apply multiple times? The multiple times answer, I know exactly where that rule is, and that answer, and that's no, and that's right here in the rules under section 1291.410. And it says, a principal officer cannot be on more than one application.
Then by default, you couldn't do multiple regions because aren't those separate applications?
Correct. And I believe they mentioned it again in here. I think there's another place they say it, but let me just double check. No. And then the second question is, right, you couldn't apply for multiple reasons because you can only be on one application, but I do want to see if they specifically talk about it on here, just as a double check. And so this is just the regions. Boom.
There we go.
Let me tell y'all, I love rules. I'm a lawyer, so y'all know that already. Because I just like to know what the deal is, you feel me? All right, applicants are prohibited from applying in more than one BLS region and are limited to one application in that BLS region. I really hope I'm not boring y'all by showing y'all the minutia of finding these answers, because truly this is how this is done. This is what the lawyers do. This is what the excellent lawyers do. And I want you guys to be equipped to self-advocate and self-represent. Okay, what's next, sister?
So the next question, and I'm not seeing a name, so this might be Alexander also. Can I legally sell my 51% and be removed from the license?
All right, let's look what the rules say. Now, I'm gonna tell you that my guesstimation and I'm gonna, check this, is no, because you guys might remember when I was presenting, there was a rule about replacing. A principal officer cannot be replaced. So if you can't replace the principal officer, how are you gonna sell it? But let's go to the rules to show you guys where in the rules is saying this. This is what, now I want to be clear with you guys. We are covering what the current rules are. We know if you've been in this industry as long as some of us have, that's what the rules say right now. Doesn't mean rules don't get challenged, doesn't mean rules don't change, doesn't mean positions don't get revised and rules don't get revised later. So we are just saying what they say right now. I want to be clear, okay? So let's go back here. Application. So where's my replace? I know where this answer is. I was just looking at it when I did my slides, so I just want to find it. Hold on, let me see. This age. Now, they are being, I just want to show you this while it's up right here in terms of how they're really trying to keep people off more than one application, and why you guys got to be smart about who you team up with to make sure that they're not going to put you in a jam by being on more than one. If you look at this rule right here, if 2 or more applications include the same principal officer, the department will notify the applicant at its identified primary and alternate contacts and the principal officer who is listed on 2 or more applications via email. Upon this notification, the identified principal officer has 3 business days to notify the department of its resignation from all but one of the proposed entities. This notification shall be submitted to the department in writing. Here, if the identified principal officer does not notify the department of the principal officer's required resignation within the required time period, each applicant notified shall forfeit its application and fee. Tricia girl. So that's why I'm really focused on making sure people understand like who they team up with, because you can get put in a jam.
And what it doesn't say is that it will notify all of the
right.
There's applicants. It only is it says they're only required by law to notify the person who's on multiple. So if we had a 3-part team, because you and I wouldn't ever do this to each other. But if a 3rd person was on our application and they were on somebody else's application, they could get the notification and we might not.
And just to clarify one thing you said for everybody else, because I know we just reading this, they're going to notify the applicant at its identified primary and alternate contact and the principal officer. So okay. Whoever the primary and alternate contact will find out, and the affected principal officer will find out, but not the whole team necessarily.
Which that means all of that could be the same person, that one person, and not all of the other team members. It's possible. It's not correct. It's not that it's going to happen, but it's possible.
Right. But now I'm going to get back to the question on hand, but I just want to point rules like that out while we're kind of combing through rules. And so just give me a second here to find this, maybe it's this one, this rule about replacing officer. Here we go. All right. So I'm under section 1291.420. Why I'm familiar with going through these rules this fast, you all will be too, because you're going to do what? Print these rules off for yourself, and you're going to highlight and make notes and get yourself very, very, very familiar with these rules. So that's how I'm flipping through these this fast, because I'm always on here. So under H, if the department informs the top principal of his intent to deny the issuance of a conditional license because one of the applicant's principal officers has violated the act, the principal officer may resign. Okay, we talked about that rule. Let's look at I. If a principal officer resigns after they've been notified of the intent to deny, that they may not replace. So we've talked about that rule. If the department affirms deny, so what I'm looking for is anything that says that you cannot transfer licenses. I want to double check that, you know, because I have never really looked at the rules for that in a while. I know it came up during drafts, but I want to see if it's in this final draft. All right, so we got the rule about dying. We got, no, nothing here. So we want to see, what we're looking for is things about transferring licenses, selling licenses, because that's the question, right? Let me just make sure. Can I sell my license, right? So let's see, conditional license requirements. Boom, right at the top. A conditional license. So when you say, just to clarify for everybody, when Alexander says, can I legally sell my 51% or be removed from the license, he's talking about when not, he's talking about, let's say they win, his team wins the lottery. They make it through the document proof process. They're now issued a conditional license, which is the license you get, the initial license that you get, that's a legal term. That's the initial license that you get in this period that you have to build out your dispensary, get everything up to go through inspections, go through zoning, a lot of things before you get your final license. So what this person is asking is, can I sell it? And in legal terms, that's called selling, sometimes transferring, sometimes assigning. And you see right here the answer to that question, a conditional license cannot be sold, transferred, or assigned, and the conditional license holder cannot in any way change its ownership structure, including by removing or adding any principal officers, except for in the event of death of a principal officer. So in short, no. Under these rules, to be clear, as the rules are currently written, no. If they change these rules, all right, but as it's currently written, the answer is no.
All right. The next.
And they talk a little bit more about this whole, like, if the principal officer of a conditional license holder dies prior to issuance of any, the final license, which is called the adult use dispensing organization license, the conditional license holder shall inform the department of the death and submit an updated table of organization. A principal officer may be added to the ownership structure of a conditional license holder, excuse me, only in the event of replacing a deceased principal officer, subject to department approval of that principal officer. The department will consider, but is not limited to, the proposed principal officer's role, qualifications, and the necessity of adding a principal officer when considering the new principal officer. So I want to be clear about these rules, if I can hopefully be. They have rules around replacing principal officers at different phases in the game. There's rules about whether you can replace during the application process, where you are in the deficiency notice process, which is when they're telling you, I'm not seeing social equity status here. Send us these prove up documents. And if during that process, it is determined that somebody on your team is making you ineligible, the rules right now are saying that that person can resign to make you eligible. We talked about that earlier in the presentation. And then they have a rule saying that you can't replace them though. During that part, you can't replace them. They can only resign. So if them resigning still doesn't make you eligible under the current rules, so there's essentially, you need to make sure you put together an eligible team. Okay. And under those rules, they're saying if somebody dies during that part of the process, you can only replace them if that person dying makes your application no longer eligible. But if they die and your application is still eligible, you cannot replace them. That's different than this question we just had, which is, once I'm past all of that, I prove my status, I won my lottery and I proved my status, and I now have a conditional license or a regular license, can I transfer and sell? And those have rules that we just went over saying that the answer is no, currently. Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna take one more question and then I'm gonna take probably a break. Let's see how long it takes to get through it.
Okay. Next question is, I keep getting emails from Cresco and other companies to be a part of their social equity applications, and they are advertising online to apply and they will pay.
That goes back to my original messaging earlier saying you have to vet those opportunities. That's not something we're equipped to do here because we're not a law firm and we don't give out legal advice. Okay.
Okay. And actually the next question, I think you have actually answered already previously. Do you have to apply as a company or can you apply as an individual and then form the company if we win the license? That was actually previously asked by someone else. And so we've already reviewed that one. Am I correct in that?
Do you have to apply a company or can you apply as an individual and then form a company? Right, I answered that previously.
Yep. Yep.
Which, as you said, was no.
And if you missed the breakdown of where she found the answer, we will put this recording up as well. So you're welcome to go back and watch the recording after we posted it to be able to see the breakdown of which rule gave that answer. Okay, so did you want to go ahead and take a break?
Yeah, well, let's take one more because those were so quick.
Okay. Okay, Melina says, my team formed a company in fall of 2019 and applied at the first application period. My company is still in business. Do I need to update our articles for any reason if everything is exactly the same? Our articles of organization hasn't changed much except my last name.
Do I need to update my article or it has changed much except my last name? If you're asking this question, Melina, to me, do you have to update your articles because you want to apply in this application round, then my answer to you is I don't know. Because what I don't know is whether your company meets this 51%. So what you need to do is look at your ownership documents and see whether it's set up in a way that meets the current definition of a social equity applicant to make you eligible for this lottery.
Right, because the prior definition is very different than this definition.
Right. So I don't know the answer to that. Only you can find that out by looking at your own ownership documents and then going to the rules that I've pointed out, showing you where criteria A and criteria B is to see if those ownership and agreements and all of those things match. I believe that's what you, let me know if I'm understanding your question. You can ask a follow-up question, but I believe that you're asking about it in terms of being a social equity applicant. If you're just asking like, generally, do you need a whole new company to apply? We've answered that already in the sense of no, you can put in an application with or without a formed entity. That's not required. But what you should be thinking about is whether you want to be on teams with people without ownership and entity documents in place. Because if you win this lottery, you are now talking about a multi-million-dollar asset. And I can tell you as an attorney that people get brand new when it's that type of money on the table. Okay, we are going to take a break here. And what I will say to folks during this break is that we have sent to you a survey And I would like to kindly request that if you have been participating in our CannaTrep programs and you have any feedback for us on, hey, y'all, love it, y'all rocking it, or hey, y'all, here's some ideas for improvement. Either way, we would love to hear from you so that we can keep offering things like this to make legal education and business education accessible to our community. So please, on this break, check your email that you registered for this event for, and please take that quick survey for us. Even if you took a survey last week, even if you took a survey the week before that, or a month
2 years
before that,
ago, whenever.
we need a survey every single time so that we can continue to evaluate and show our value. It is 7:25. Let's come back at 7:35 so that you can have some minutes for a break and some minutes to take that survey. I'm counting on y'all to take that survey. Okay, we'll be back. All right.
Are you ready, sister?
I am ready, MB. What I'm gonna do, because this next section is really short, I'm
Okay.
just gonna go ahead and finish this next section
And then finish
and
it.
make our announcements, and then we'll do Q&A for the rest.
Okay. Sounds
Okay. All right, welcome back, everybody. And hopefully you took our survey, because we really appreciate you for it. So preparing for the document proof process. Now, while they did change the process to where you don't have to assemble all of these documents and hand them in when you submit your application, if I were on a team doing this, using Tricia and I as an example again, I would recommend what I would do for myself, which is organize, collect, and prepare these documents now, even though they're not being submitted. And one of the main reasons is to trust and verify your applicant team members before submission. Because once you submit with them, you're kind of stuck with them in a lot of ways, right? And so I would be looking at proof of social equity status, and I will get with my team, maybe assign somebody on the team to handle that part of things. And really make sure that everybody can prove what makes you all get to that 51%. And if you go to the document table, proven social equity status is covered currently under the latest draft, documents 6, 7, and 8. There's a social equity criteria guide, which is a manual explaining social equity eligibility. There's a social equity criteria A interactive map for helping you understand if your address or addresses meet criteria A. There's a social equity criteria acceptable documents guide, which is a manual explaining examples of acceptable documents for proof of social equity status for A and B. I highly recommend that you get with your teammates and you organize and collect the documents now. Before I finish off with answering questions, here are upcoming webinars. Today, we just are about to shortly finish up the new online dispensary application webinar. February 9th, I will be hosting a Q&A session number 1 as a follow-up. February 23rd, I will be hosting a Q&A session number 2 as an additional follow-up. You can find and register for our events on our website, www.CannaTrep.com. You can submit brief advising questions on there. If you are a conditional license holder currently, you can request individual consulting on there. You can find webinar registrations for upcoming events and recordings from past events on there. Guys, we are a small family-owned business, so please give us a few days to get things uploaded, a few business days, maybe even a week. We try our best. You can also find ebooks on there. All right, let's get back into some things here.
All right. So the next question at the top of the list is, does a social equity loan from DCEO apply to this round of dispensary application?
The answer to that is I don't know. I have not gotten that far. And if I had to guess, neither have they. But what I will say is any questions we get tonight that I don't know the answer to, I will go search for it and we will send out a group email to everyone telling them the answer. So Tricia, we get to keep this Q&A, right?
I believe, yes, it shows up in Zoom.
Okay. Okay,
so, yeah,
Crowder.
So what I'm going to type an answer here and say we will research and get back to you, because then that'll
Yeah.
keep you fine.
Let me research that one.
Okay. Then the next question is, Oh, so Alexander was saying he switched to his computer and he didn't see his questions anymore, so he wasn't sure if it was still there. So Alexander, if you didn't, I know one of them I saw. So
I saw two at least.
Right, so I know, well, one of them he repeated, but you hadn't gotten to it yet, so I deleted it. So the first one, I don't know if you heard the answer to the question, Alexander. You could ask it again, or you can watch the recording later, because I know it was answered.
Got it.
Okay, so Jim is clarifying about the gun violence. So the applicant must be the victim. What if there was a child killed?
Okay, let's go back to the rule. You know, that's where I love to live when I'm working on complex legal things. So let me find my rules again.
And I'm going to make an assumption like that maybe it was the child of the applicant or some impact that impacted the applicant maybe.
Right, so let's see what the rules say here. Where would that be? I think here. Criteria, that was criteria B. Number 3, an individual who has been a victim of firearm, as those terms are defined in this part, this must be evidenced by either a police report or medical record. So right now, that appears to be a no, because it doesn't say a family member on here like it does you see under some of these other criteria Bs that has an individual who has been, and it says an individual who has a family member who has been, whereas we don't see that same language here. But I will continue to search just to make sure an individual who has been a victim of firearm injury, or though as those terms are defined in this part. And I believe when we looked at that definition, it was just about what a firearm, what type of firearm, but we'll double check. Firearm injury means a gunshot wound, right? So there's this again, no mention of family members. So that answer appears to be no. The applicant must be the victim under that particular criteria.
Okay, you ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay, so Melina is clarifying about the upload question earlier. It says, when online, it did look like I had to upload information.
Oh, that was the old application.
I was going to say, could that have been?
It was. So Melina, on Monday when the application launched, IDFPR, the portal had mistakenly had the wrong application uploaded. And IDFPR sent an announcement. If you pull up that document guide, under document number 5, click that link and it'll explain to you what happened. That they had an error and had the wrong application up. So perhaps that application was asking for documents or something like that. But that was the wrong one. So they closed it for repairs and are repairing it, and they're gonna open it back up. But please read that announcement, because if you submitted an application on Monday during that period it was open before they closed it on Tuesday or Monday night, whenever they ended up closing it, you have to resubmit your application, but you don't have to pay another application fee when they open it back up again. Okay.
Okay. Oh, she goes on to say she'll wait for the application to open up again and double check that she's not being required to load any documents, because that's why it was.
I bet it was. I can see that. I think it was an error.
Yep. Okay, next question. Are they prioritizing veterans again this time as a unicorn applicant? In other words, will a veteran SEA trump a non-veteran SEA?
I believe criteria A and B, which is where you find out what the social equity applicant definition is, does not mention veteran, but let me double check. And so I can show you all. So this is me, as they say, teaching how to fish. Shout out to my partner who just, hey, you're teaching how to fish, told me that on the break when I said, hey, I hope I'm not doing too much tediousness with going through these rules, because the truth is you all do need to know how to do this for yourselves, because we're here in this short time, you know, you need to know how to do this. So I'm going to go back to criteria A and criteria B. And the first thing I like to do when I, you know, you probably all know I like to see, oh, do I see veteran? I do not see veteran. And then I just double check, because maybe it might say armed forces or, you know, something like that. So I just want to double check. And so I would go under criteria A to see if I'm seeing anything about veterans. I'm not seeing anything about veterans. I'm doing a little speed reading here. Not seeing anything about veterans under A. Going under B, not seeing anything about veterans. Not seeing anything about veterans. It does not appear that veterans are a part of the definition. Please take a close look at the rules for yourself as well, just to make sure. Okay.
All right, next question. Can a principal officer be added to a team after the application has been submitted or after the lottery?
So it's two questions going on here, and we've covered both during this presentation. The first question, and I encourage you all to rewatch this presentation, maybe even more than once, as you kind of see how to go through rules like an attorney would. The first question is, can a principal officer be added to a team after the application has been submitted? And the answer to that is no, a principal officer cannot be added to the application after it's been submitted, unless a principal officer dies and their death makes you no longer eligible as a social equity applicant. If their death, if they die and your team is still eligible, you cannot replace them. So that's the first part. The second part you're asking is after the lottery, which I believe what you're referring to here is once you win your conditional license, can you add a principal officer? And we've covered that as well. And I want you to rewatch this to go back to the law part of this, because I don't want to, you know, take the time to do that again. So I want to get to as many questions as possible, and it's been addressed a few times. But the answer is no again, that a principal officer cannot be added to a team after the application, after you get the conditional license, except for in a few circumstances. And let's go back to where that was, because I do want to show that part one more time, because I think we only did that one once. And that one was, a conditional license cannot be sold, transferred, or assigned. Conditional license holder cannot in any way change its ownership structure during the conditional phase. So that's the phase when you first win the lottery and you make it through all the hoops approving your social equity status, and they have now issued you the conditional license. No. Now let's say you make it through all of your conditional license stuff. You're good to go. You got checked off on all your zoning, the build out. You got checked off on all of your site visits, all of the things you're supposed to do. And now you get your adult use final version of your license. It is at that point that they're saying a principal officer may be added to the structure in the event of death. That's under here, right here, C, that they'll consider it, but they need to look at their qualifications and decide. Okay.
Okay. Alexander says, thank you. Thank y'all so much for what you are doing and informing us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Last question. I win the lottery, but I have no money. Can I then solicit investors? I will lose my license because I do not have the money to move forward. Or maybe it says, or it probably should say, or will I? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, will I lose my license because I do not have the money to move forward?
So I will answer this from the standpoint of you get your conditional license is what I'm guessing. Because when people say they won the lottery, I think they mean like they won the lottery, they've proven their social equity status, because winning the lottery does not get you a license. I want to be very clear. Winning a lottery gives you an opportunity to next prove your social equity status. And you have to go through what's called a prove up period and a deficiency notice process. And that is when the department will send you notices saying, hey, we missing documents. You did not quite give us everything we need to see your social equity status. You make it through those hoops, and now you get a conditional license. If at that point you want to get investors, well, I would just go to the rules, because I don't know what you mean. Not all investors are, how can I put this? If you're trying to transfer ownership to them in return for an investment, under the current written rules, you cannot give them any ownership.
Right.
Now, that's the current written rules.
Okay, I thought it was me this time, because usually I'm the one that's frozen, but SL froze. Okay, let me send her a message. She will probably be back shortly. So I'm going to scroll through the questions, because I've seen a couple that have already been answered. So that way, when she comes back, she'll be able to answer those. So the questions, so there's a question from Belisha about veteran status that was answered. So if you didn't see that answer, you can go back and watch the video on that. Here she comes. Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Yes.
So I can't really speak to whether you're gonna lose your license, because I don't know what all the circumstances are gonna be. Only thing I can say is these are what the rules say about whether you can transfer any of the ownership. And as of right now, those answers appear to be no.
Okay. Next question. So Melina's clarifying her question about the ownership of her company that was formed in 19. She was only concerned that it was signed in 2019. Otherwise, they're all set. The 51% owners, social equity applicant.
Say that again, because I can't read them anymore.
Okay. Melina was clarifying her earlier question about the ownership of her company. She was saying that she was only concerned that it was signed in 2019. Otherwise, they're all set because a 51% owner is the social equity applicant.
Under the current definition.
Right, because remember, those definitions have changed. So like you said, when you answered the question previously, as long as your definition of social equity now, as long as you match the definition of social equity now, because it's not the same as the definition of social equity back in 2019.
Correct. So I would just double check that.
Yep.
In the documents.
Yep.
Proving it.
Okay, so next question.
Hold on, one more thing about that.
Okay.
I want you guys to collect those documents proving it now, because that's not always as easy as you think. Tracking down school records. If you look at that document number 6, document number 8, the guide to acceptable documents, It's not always as easy. So you could very well meet it and not be able to find the documents and not be able to pull them together. And you're out of luck if you can't do that. So that's why I'm encouraging you to find those documents now to make sure your team is all set to go.
All right. The next two questions are actually the same. The new rules read as though you do not have to be an Illinois resident. Am I correct?
That sounds about correct, but let me just pull up the rules now. Give me a second. Tricia, you super used to me, so you know I'm like, let me look.
I already know how it goes because it's not about what you think, it's about what you can prove.
Right.
Both as it relates to your documents, but also in the law.
Right. So social criteria A and B. So if you look at A, this says nothing about Illinois. They're saying a census tract that has a poverty rate of at least 20%, according to the latest 5-year American Community Survey study. Resided 5 out of the last 10 in a census tract where at least 20% of the household receives SNAP. That could be anywhere. An individual who has resided 5 out of the last preceding 10 in a census tract classified as low income and low access, or at least, right, once again, nothing about Illinois. An individual who has received Medicaid, supplemental income, SSD, subsidized housing, doesn't require Illinois. Individual who has resided for at least 5 out of the preceding 10 in the census tract in the top 15 percentile for the percent of residents in the census tract failing to graduate from high school in that state. Doesn't say Illinois, as classified by this authority. So to answer that question, it does not appear that you are required to be an Illinois resident, reading the rules.
All right. Next question, are there any application rubrics or once you get chosen and can't comply, you get awarded?
Say that one more time.
Are there any application rubrics or once you get chosen and can't comply, you get awarded?
There are not any, I believe the question is asking about whether there is a point system when you say rubric like there was last time. And the answer is no, there is no point system in this application. If you look at this mock, can you see the mock application now?
Yes.
There's nothing about a point system in here. And if you look at the step guide, there's nothing about points or scoring in here. What they say is, hey, if you meet this if you believe that you are eligible as a social equity applicant, submit your application, pay your fee. They're going to post a list of everybody who submitted. They're going to give 5 days for people to say, hey, I submitted and I wasn't on that list. I'm supposed to be in that lottery. Then they're going to do the lottery and pull 55 at number 5. And number 6 here, they're going to have 45-day prove-up period for you to prove your social equity status. And I don't see anything about them scoring the social equity status here. It's just a matter of can you meet that prove-up or not. Okay. I'm ready.
All right. And actually, that it prompted a question to me, but I actually have seen the answer in what's on the screen right now, because it's like, okay, well, what if I didn't make it in the lottery? Well, what happened? Well, step 9 tells you if a top participant is unable to correct its deficiencies or they missed the prove-up period, all of that, they'll proceed to the next eligible top participant from the lottery results.
Right. So you're saying, let's say you win the lottery and you can't prove your social equity status, then they disqualify, deny you, and they pull the next person.
Yep.
Up.
Yep. All right.
All right. I want to be mindful, Tricia, that it's 8 p.m.
Okay.
About how many questions do we have in the queue right now?
We've got 1, 2, with one of them, I think is already addressed.
Okay. Cool.
3,
About
4, 5, 6. But I think some of
Okay.
these will be answered quickly, I think.
Okay,
All right.
awesome.
So next question is, can we define family member as in criteria B, please, and thank you?
Can we define family member?
As in
Yes.
criteria.
So let's go to the rules. Are my rules showing?
Yes.
So I was trying to see, do I see anything about family? Member of impacted family or impacted family means an individual who has a parent, legal guardian, child, spouse, or dependent, or was a dependent of an individual who prior to this date was arrested or convicted of or adjudicated delinquent for any offense that is eligible for expungement under this act. And again, that's now referring to the CRTA. So you want to look at over here in this definition again, just to make sure you understand the full scope. Member of an impacted family means an individual who has a parent, legal guardian, child, spouse, or dependent, or was a dependent of an individual who prior to the effective date of this act was arrested or convicted of or adjudicated delinquent for any offense that is eligible for expungement under this act. And I believe that this here, to make it easy for folks in the rules, that they told you what the qualifying offenses were eligible for expungement. Possession of not more than 500 grams of cannabis, or manufacture, delivery, or possession with intent to deliver or manufacture of cannabis up to 30 grams. Same thing for impacted family member. And I want you all to keep in mind something that is spelled out here that wasn't spelled out last time, which is similar offense in Illinois or federally or any other state. Okay.
All right. Next question is, DCEO still helping with cannabis loans?
Does the DCO still do that?
Yeah.
Is that what it's asking? Yes, yes, it does. They still run a loan program for social equity applicants. Yes.
Okay, so based on what I heard her say so far on the investment question, it seems like we have to either include the investors on the front end as equity owners or just borrow money in the form of a loan. Am I correct?
So I don't want to, these are very deeply personal questions to your team, your circumstances, your legal advisors, your financial advisors. So I don't feel comfortable just making this black and white like this. It's not this black and white. What I'm saying is these are the rules. Take a look at them, get with your team, and decide how you want to organize around the current draft of the rules. I can't really get into like specifics of like the black and white, yes, do this, yes, do that, because it's all, it really just comes down to look at the rules and make a determination as to how you want to proceed based on how they're written up right now.
All right.
Guys, you have to remember that we're not giving legal advice here, and some of these questions like this one starts to kind of get into the territory of legal advice.
Right. So the next question is, what if the applicant was incarcerated during those 5 of the last 10 years? Do any of the requirements meet this criteria?
If they were incarcerated during the last 5 out of 10 years, if they're asking this from a point of view of, can you meet criteria A while incarcerated? I'm going to tell you that I don't know if that's what they're at. You see where I'm going, Tricia? Like this where you live thing. If you were living in prison, you know, right. They're trying to say like, hey, if you're living in prison, can you meet this? What address do they use for somebody? And I would say that that's not actually a clear answer right here. And that's not even an answer that I cannot believe fine, because I don't believe that answer is answered anywhere. And that you need to contact the department and ask that question.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. And what I was also going to ask, do you recall when we whether or not they said that they were gonna have like Q&As listed on the website again.
I believe that they're gonna announce it at some point,
Okay.
taking questions. So yes, that question needs to go directly to the department. Because I don't even think in that, if it was anywhere, Crowder, it would be either in the rules, which I know already that's not addressed in the rules, because I've been through these rules a bunch. And I know that it could also potentially be under document number 8, where they say social equity criteria acceptable documents guide, or number 6, social equity criteria guide. But I've been through those a few times and I haven't seen it, but I would recommend, Crowder, that you go look at those documents to see if you see them. Because we time constraint here, I'm gonna go ahead and let you go take a look and see if that's addressed. I don't remember seeing it, and suggest that you go ahead and ask the department that question. How do you deal with what the address is of an incarcerated individual? If they've been incarcerated during that 5 out of 10, what address is being used? Is it the address from the impacted area that they lived in before? That's a great question to ask them. Okay.
Okay. I clicked away for half a second. Let me pull this back. All right. For criteria B, we have a rap sheet of a close family member, the parenthesis, the 51% owner's son, showing minor cannabis related charges per the rules. Does a rap sheet have to be currently printed? The document I have now was sent by the Illinois State Police Department in 2017. Do you think that will be a problem?
I think that you should look at the acceptable documents guide under number 8, criteria B, to see what they say about the acceptable documents to show, and to see if there is a timeline on how old it can be. The last time I looked at it, I don't remember it saying that it could only be this many years old, or it had to be recently printed in the last year or anything like that. But I think you should go take a look at document number 8 to see whether that document will work. And if you don't see the answer there, because it's silent, it may just not mention how old copies of these arrests, convictions, adjudications, police records, court records, it may not say. And if it's silent, ask the department.
All right. And the last question, just for clarity, do we have to qualify for both criteria A and criteria B?
Great question. And the answer is, my sheet showing?
Yes.
The answer is right here in the rules, where it says, an acknowledgement that if awarded an opportunity for conditional license, the business entity is 51% or more owned or controlled by one or more individuals who each meet the combination of at least one, I believe this is supposed to be of the criteria under A and one of the criteria under B. It's an and, not an or. So the answer is yes.
Okay. And those are all of the questions that we have.
Awesome. I've had a lot of fun.
As have I. So, although you had way more fun than me. So, on behalf of the team at the TREP School, I want to thank everyone for coming out. Thank you also for responding to our survey. We will do everything we can to continue to advocate for you and to continue to bring you this educational programming so that you can compete in this highly competitive cannabis business environment. So we will have a Q&A session again, and it will be a Q&A only session on February 9th, which is next week. And so you can sign up for that. Oh, somebody type something in the Q&A. I knew that was going to happen. That always happens. Oh, this is not a question. You both did an amazing job as usual. I want to say thank you so much for helping the community. Please keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Indrani.
Thank you.
So yes, we want to continue doing this work and continually, we advocate for you all even when you don't know it. And we will continue to do so as much as possible.
All right.
So good night, everyone.
Good night.
Oh, Indrani, and anybody who missed the survey on break, the survey should still be in your email. So if you missed the survey, it was emailed to you during the break. So please check your email. You still have the opportunity to respond.
Thank you, friend, who made a comment that we did a magnificent webinar. Thank you.
It's been our pleasure.
Okay.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.